Hey there, welcome to today's episode. It's going to be a live, unedited session. It's a very hot day here in the studio. I know I'm wearing a woolly hat, but it's the only way I can keep my mic in the right place. I need to get some kind of headband instead of this thick woolly hat. But anyway, we're taking a look at this Zoom ARQ. Thought I'd just try and show you the best of this little device in one episode. So be a little bit chatty. There will be some practical stuff as we run through the device. We're not really going to make so much of a beat. I just want to show you the features and functions of this thing because it's just so unusual. I found it in the local classifieds. They weren't very popular. I think that's why I didn't know it existed until I saw this one under samplers. But for the £100 that I paid for it, it's a very capable little unit, and I think that's about the going rate, 100 to 150 in the UK. You can find these on the secondhand market, and there seems to be a few of them about. I think they were unpopular because maybe it's the kind of donut shape, and this is a proper donut. If you've never seen one of these, this thing comes off. It's a separate MIDI controller. You can actually plug in other MIDI controllers, which is cool because this uses a USB cable. Or if you plug in a Bluetooth adapter, you can make this thing completely wireless to the base station and be kind of running around doing performance stuff. I think the other performance aspect of this as well is that it will control parameters for the effects. If you've set an effect, you can kind of do this kind of thing and it changes the effects. But take that out of the equation that it's a little bit strange. It's actually very, very capable. If you look at it on paper, it does almost as much as something like my SP404 Mark II. The sample chopping is a little bit limited. I'll run you through some of that in a second. But I just want to give you, in as quick a time as possible, an overview of this thing. I think one of the big reasons it was unpopular as well is that when it turns on, it's got some pretty nasty lights on it. When it's off, I think it's kind of cool. It looks like Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey 2001, even like the original Alien movie from the 70s where they were predicting what the space would look like in the future. So it's kind of retro and modern at the same time. But that's sort of what it reminds me of. When you turn it on, these LCDs are fine. And actually the build quality, just while we're here, is pretty good. But this, you get these kind of neon nightmare, Christmas tree on acid kind of lights. It looks pretty horrible. That's the bit that kind of, I'm assuming, would turn most people off from this. But there is one thing to consider. Now here we've got a little bit of a light, but that's because there's something going on in this project. Let me just find one of my completely empty projects where there's nothing, like this one. And you will notice we don't have any LEDs. Now you can turn the LEDs off. That's the thing I'm trying to get to. The problem with it is that you have to do it per pad. I haven't found a way of just turning all LEDs off, and I've been through the manual. The other issue is that if you start creating instruments, it assigns a color to it. Now, it can still be turned off, but you just find if you want to keep it like this, and this is just a single white light, just letting you know what pad you're working on, I think that looks perfectly cool. I actually kind of like the way it looks, but you will have to keep turning the LEDs off to just get back to this state. So it's a workaround, but if that's all that's putting you off, don't let some colored lights kind of turn you off. If we move over to one of the demo songs, with which there are many, I think like the first 100 patterns or something are all demo songs, and there's 380 patterns that you can create on this thing, but they all look like this. It's really, really awful. There are 32 different colors, so if you like the colors and you want to change those, you can change them. And you can also set animations for those colors, so as it hits a certain step, it will trigger and do some kind of weird animated effect. It's all a bit cheesy for me, but just know that you can suddenly, if you're watching this and you think the LEDs look cool, then fair enough. I think they look bloody awful. So this is blank. Just want to start with a blank, empty project. Works like an MPC. You have patterns of which you can then move in real time using pattern mode. So we're in pattern mode. If I change to the next pattern, it will play the first one and then move to the next one. And the BPM can be independent, even though these are all set to 80 because I was just copying something over. It could be 80 to 120 to 170 to whatever. And it will just end one pattern and move to the next one without a break and just play. So you can use it like a DJ device if you want. Be pretty cool. 380 patterns that you can overwrite and create. So when you want to create more complex tracks, you could essentially create a track inside of one pattern. But for more complex tracks, then you would create multiple patterns and chain them. Real time in pattern mode or in song mode, you can link them together like an MPC. You can tell it the order in which to play. And if you hook it up via the MIDI with the MIDI out and stuff, I dare say you could sync that to your DAW, and then you could just mute out, say, something that you don't want. You could just record out your drums first, then your sample chops and stuff. There's plenty of scope with this thing, and making full beats on it is completely possible. That's one thing that I want to say. In terms of the ins and outs, very quickly, just with the layout, we've got a power adapter. You can use a power bank if you like. I've seen people do that online with these. 1/4-inch stereo out, so nice enough. 3.5mm audio in, which samples in stereo and mono, and we'll talk more about that later. We've got a little micro USB port, which you can hook up to your computer and use this as a MIDI controller to control your software. You've got a headphone port on the front, and because this has a USB cable, you can take off this MIDI controller donut, and you can plug in other MIDI controllers and use those instead. So if you just want to use this as like a base station, this little Korg Nano key works with it. And for some reason, my Arturia Mini Lab 25 keys doesn't seem to work, but this one does, and it uses the same cable. In fact, if I just show you it very quickly, let's unplug that. You'll see it says it's disconnected. This one goes in this way, but that's hooked up. I don't know how obvious it will be, but you'll see the instrument changing on there. That's it, changing the instrument for the 16. So it's the same as using 16 pads, or you just use this thing instead. We'll put it back to the original ring controller. I just wanted you to be aware that if you hate the ring controller, you can bypass it. It's a little bit fiddly getting this thing back in, and you have to make sure it's in the right way because I think it goes upside down. That's it. Back to the Neon Nightmare, and then hopefully they will bugger off. So there we go. You start with a pattern, and then you build from there. It's a step sequencer, 32 steps that play around in a circle on an empty pattern where we don't have any information. Should just be able to watch that move around. Perfectly fine. Master effects, you've got all the buttons that you need. One thing that's great about this device is that the layout is really good. Now, finger drumming and stuff, I would put drums down here for kind of finger drumming. It's a little bit weird over here. Completely possible, but the step sequencer, 32 steps, let's not forget, that's more than what you get on a lot of devices, even the more modern stuff. It's usually like 16 steps that you see in a linear fashion, and this loops around, which to me, being a DJ, makes perfect sense. That's your sequencer, and it loops. One of the limitations, but the thing that I actually like about it, is you can only do up to 4 bars, 64 steps per pattern, but because you've got 380 patterns, that's not a downside. The good thing about it means that sometimes if they let you create too many patterns on a device, it's hard to know what page you're on when you're looking at the steps moving around. Because this only goes up to 4, if you've got a 4-bar project, this one is currently 2 bars. If I do function and just change the length of it to 4, really simple, you'll see we've now got 4. I'm either looking at bar 1, I press this, bar 2, bar 3, or bar 4. You never really get lost. And it's the same for the menus. The only menu that has a lot of options is for when you're selecting your pads for your loops, your one-shots, your instruments. You have those loaded up. When you click on there, you get a bunch of parameters that you can change for this device. And I'll run you through those in a second because that's all this video is about. It's just showing you what this thing's capable of. We'll do beat making and stuff in other episodes, but for today, I just want to show you all the basics. And yeah, there are a lot of parameters in that menu, but aside from that, everything else is kind of at your fingertips, your transport controls, your effects, the parameters, the volume control, no reaching around looking for other things. And if you press the function button, quantization off, 1/16 notes, 132, that kind of stuff, it's all just one button press away and you're there. Same with your bar length and a couple of other options here, turning the metronome off and on, volume. A couple of menu items up here, but they're pre-set up items, so your LCD contrast, SD card formatting, all of that, you're not doing that on a regular basis, so it doesn't matter that there's a few more menus, but even those aren't particularly menus within menus within menus. It's just laid out really nice. Sound quality of it's okay, and you've got master effects a bit like you have on an SP. One of the big things this has is a lot of automation possibilities. So for all of this, when you're inside these parameters per pad, you've got your just a bunch of different stuff, LFOs, pitch modulation, panning modulation, all that kind of stuff. A lot of those parameters can be tweaked and recorded in real time, so you can automate all of those as well as the main master effects as well. This thing's got a lot going for it for like 100 quid. It was a cheap little device, but I can't think of anything else on the market. And all right, even in the second-hand market, what else can you get for around 100 quid that does that much? I can't think of a lot. And as I've got no reason to sell you one. I don't have any affiliation with Zoom. 7 years old, this thing at this point. It's not even going to be a popular video because I doubt anyone's looking for it. But it just is. Sometimes there's these little things that, yeah, it's a bit kooky looking and the LEDs are horrible. But if you can get past that, it's got a lot to offer as a little sampler. And I actually think the layout of it and everything just makes it kind of fun to play on. So let's take a look at some of the options. Very, very quickly, as I said, we just want to cover the basics. The first one is, how does it work? So you work with 16 pads around the outside, like an MPC. And that is per pattern. So you have 16 pads that you can play and trigger for every pattern. Now, yeah, you get banks and things on MPCs where you've kind of got more, but it still does a lot because I believe, according to some stuff online, I can't find this in the manual, but someone had written this in one of the forums where these were popular, that you can play 16 stereo samples all at exactly the same time per step, which opens up a lot of possibilities there. So it doesn't feel like there's a great polyphony limit where it starts stealing voices from other places. And so far with my tests of it, I haven't really found that either. Obviously, you input those to the steps, which you can do by holding a step and just triggering and setting that up. And that can be a loop, an individual sample. You've got your pad and scale mode if you want to start doing chords, and we'll look more at that in a second. But that's how you input to the step sequencer. On top of that, you've got real-time recording. So you can either input to the steps up to 32. You can't do 64 in terms of like the divisions. And how that works, just very, very quickly. If we say we're on pad or pattern 1, bar 1, if you're in 16 notes like this, when you press play, it represents one bar in half a circle, and then the second bar is played over here. If you move it to 132, then one whole circle is one bar. You still just move and navigate between, but that's how you add more steps. There's no 64, as I said. Could get slightly more complex patterns, but because you can use the arpeggiator on any of the sounds, that's a way to get like ratchets or note repeat and stuff like that per step. You do some pretty complex pattern programming that way. The other way, of course, is to just do it in real time. So you can do record and play with quantize on or quantize off. That's a big thing. I wanted to know that you could come off of the grid. So far, I haven't found any way of holding a step and then kind of tweaking the position. So the micro timing of it, using like the encoders, the only way to kind of come off the grid that I've found so far is to use sort of manual recording with quantization off, and then you can tap and input whatever you want. It's just going to record what you play. Workarounds and limitations is the same with any sampler, but that's how you do it. In terms of then, you've got a sort of your pads and your scale. So let's take a quick look at some of the other functions. Yes, we have pads, so we've got a sample here, something that's loaded up. You put it into scale mode, and then that spreads it out, and then you play it chromatically, and you can change your scale and your key, and there's a bunch of scales and keys, and you can do the octaves and move up and down like a MIDI keyboard. So one sample gets spread across the ring, and then that way you can, play it however you like. So pattern mode and song mode. So patterns, you play the individual patterns which you trigger in real time, or song mode, you record and tell it what order in order to do that. All very, very simple stuff. In order to show you some of the menus, because I think that's important, let's just start by loading something onto a pad. So you'll notice we come out of here. This is pad 1 where it says instrument 1 all the way to instrument 16. Let's start with instrument 1 and we press the parameter button. Move over till you see PCM, and that's how you select the sound. This thing has about 500 built-in sounds by default, something like that. They're a bit cheesy, but they're sounds. They're perfectly usable. They're things that you could play around with. I like bringing my own sounds in. Let's push to select, and then you can choose a category between kick drums, snares, hi-hats, cymbals, percussive sounds, voices. PCM synth is kind of like the built-in preset synth sounds. Just demo a bit of one, and then you use this button to choose different sounds. Then you can move over and you get instruments, cheesy stuff. If you go to synth, this is like a synth engine, so we'll sort of start here. Let's start with this. If you click yes and say, I want the synth engine, you can't select anything here. This is just synth or nothing, so you select it. But this is how you create like a custom synth. We start over on the left-hand side. You can choose your octave and your scale. So if you're in scale mode, this is chromatic, and that's the octave. See what I mean? You can change that. Let's leave it at 3. Then you can set the scale to one of many different scales. Look how many are in here. There's a whole bunch of musical scales. And you can also change the key, like a couple of steps down. But you see, you've got some possibilities there. We move over one. Monophonic, so currently we'll only play one pad at a time. And you've got glide. You can dial that in. Pretty cool. Keep in mind as well, with the exception of the oscillator, so there's some oscillators that you can send to the LFOs and you can kind of set this thing up. when you're talking about an individual sample, whether you've recorded that sample or it's one of the built-in ones, which I'm assuming use WAV files, you can still play around with glide and modulation and all that kind of stuff per individual step. There's a lot of sound design possibilities. But for the synth engine, you get these oscillators you can change. So we got glide. This is how you select a different sound. If you program a pattern, just a melodic thing, whatever it is, if you move back and start changing your selection, you can just change the instrument. You can just change through the presets and see what sounds the best. Keeps all that information. Your first oscillator, where you've got your pitch and then you've got the volume. The oscillator types you can see, you've got saw, square, pulse, sine, triangle, all the usual stuff. Things that you can set up. Move over, you've got a level for each oscillator. So then it moves on to the next one. You've got the second oscillator, all the same options, and the third one, the same option. So you can stack 3 all at the same time. Then you move over and you've got your pitch modulation. So then you can send it to a source, and you've got your LFOs, 1, 2, ADSR, and pressure, which I think is, well, I'm assuming press is pressure. It has aftertouch, which can be enabled or disabled in the ring settings. So you get it, you can play around here. In terms of this, you've then got your depth. So if we just choose LFO1 as an example and change the depth, you can hear it changing the pitch because it's pitch modulation, and that's what we're doing. We're kind of sending it through. I'm not going to repeat that. Just know that whenever we look at something that says modulation, you have exactly the same thing, LFO1, LFO2, ADSR, pressure. It's the same for all of those as you run through. We've got noise where you can apply white or pink noise. So if we do white and just dial it up, you can hear that noise being triggered, and you mix it in, to whatever level you want. You've got your level modulation, again, to LFO. It's always going to be the same, LFO1 to, effect. We've got an effect per pad, so nice and simple. It's different from the effects that are here. This is a different list. Compression, you've got pumper, sub bass, talkbox effect, 3-band EQ, ring modulation. I'll play you some. Might as well have some sound. And flanger, phaser, and chorus. All with their own depth or whatever the parameter is that you can change. You've got some distortion. I'm not going to play that because it's loud. You've got lo-fi, and you can change the bit rate. All of those you can set. We'll dial it back to nothing for a second. Move over to filters. You've got 24 and 12 dB filters in low pass, high pass, and band pass. So all the things that you would expect. And of course, you can change the frequency for both of those, and you get resonance and level. You've got frequency modulation. So again, exactly the same as we had before, but for the frequency. And then you've got your ADSR. So attack, decay, sustain, and release. You've got your amp modulation as well. So you can do that and send that to the LFOs. Loads of ways here. So it's not super deep synthesis, but there's plenty for a cheap little box like this to get some interesting sounds. Then you've got your output where you can do your panning left and right. And then you've got your main level at 50% currently, but it goes up to 100. That's just like mixing it. There's no mixer view, but you just change the individual levels for the pad. If we go over here, you've got your panning modulation. So again, more modulation, send it to the LFOs, the ADSR, you can do all of that. FX send, so you've got your individual effects per pad that you can choose from that list. And then you can send to one of the master effects. So if you want to, you could send it over to a little bit of reverb if we turn that on, or a little bit of delay. Let's try a little bit of stereo delay. Let's turn it on. Get the idea. You've got parameters here to tweak the amount and the delay and all that kind of stuff, but that's the amount you're going to send that through to a master effect. Let's have a look at the LEDs. This is what I use all the time, where I just move and choose between 32 different colors and some animations where it will trigger animations and do weird light show effects. I keep all of that off. And then you've got your MIDI where you can select the MIDI channel. So let's come back out of that. That is the synth engine. Then you can load up. So if we erase that, if you just want to delete something off a pad, you press erase. We'll move to yes and say yes. It's not erasing it from any internal memory or anything. It's just erasing it from the pad. So we could come in here and we could choose something else. If we go back to PCM, let's select this. I just want to show you a couple of other options because it changes. So if we move to a category with like a snare drum, that one will do. Select that. We've now got a snare drum. You'll notice one of the first things you see here, you've got pitch and reverse. They're the extra options that you get for something that I'm assuming is using WAV files. The same if you bring your own sample in. You can pitch up and down by plus and minus 24. So pretty good in terms of the pitching amount. I'm not going to go the full way. Just give you an idea that you can do a bunch of pitching per sample. You can reverse the sample, all basic stuff. Other than that, you get pretty much everything the same except for the oscillator. So you don't have the oscillators here because it's not a synth engine, but your octaves, your scale, your monophonic, your glide, everything is the same and exactly the same when you bring in a recorded sample. I think when you bring in a recorded sample, the only other one extra that you get is that you have the same here. So you've got a level, it's the volume control. With a recorded sample that you've obviously recorded yourself, you get an extra dB level. So I guess it's if you got a quiet sample and you want to crank it up, you get plus and minus 12 dB on top of your standard volume level for that particular sample. There's no normalization or anything. So I think it's a way of getting around that. If you've recorded something and it's a bit quiet, you've got 12 dB of gain you can crank and add onto your extra recorded samples. Pretty clever stuff, really. But the same, as I said, all your panning, your modulation, effects, LEDs, everything is exactly the same throughout. Plenty of scope for sound design. Now, I want to take a look at sampling and resampling very quickly because they're the kind of things you're going to want to know, particularly if you're like me. We're going to erase again just to erase what we've got on that pad so we don't have anything. And I've got my iPad set up with some samples, and I'm going to start with a kick drum. You can hear that kick drum hopefully being played. If it's too loud, your audio capture button will start glowing red. And the way that you can adjust that is either from the device you're recording from or function, and you can do audio input where you can set the audio input volume. You'll also notice you can set an effect send. So if you want to record in real time, recording a kick drum, something, any sample, and you want to apply any of these effects, you can turn those on, dial in the effect send, and record it in real time. It's really clever. Now, the other thing that we've got is capture stop. So if you go to function and capture stop, which is step 14, you can choose between stereo or mono in terms of your sampling. And you have this auto stop. So if you want to set a designated length for how long it's going to record and then stop, you can set that up. Useful for loops and things. I usually leave it off. The cool thing with this is that you get 6 minutes of stereo time and you get 12 minutes of mono stereo time. But the trick here, or the cool part, is that that is per pad. That's not just one overall limit. That is per pad. You've got 6 minutes or 12 minutes stereo mono for every single pad that you can record to. It's pretty crazy when you think about that. A lot of these samplers, my old MPCs, I think my MPC 1000 has a limit of 10 or 11 minutes in stereo because of its memory. And then that's counting down. So if I record 2 minutes on this pad, then I've got 8 minutes left over here if it was 10 minutes and so on and so forth. This thing, it's just 6 or 12 for every single pad. Keep that in mind. Anyway, you can set that up beforehand. We'll leave it as it is. To record, the other cool thing, you can then record in real time with the metronome on. So let's say you've got a separate instrument you're sampling in and you want to record a 2-bar loop. You can do that using the resampling or the audio capture with a metronome turned on. And it is the same for resampling. If you had some drum sounds and you wanted to play around and create a little drum loop and you want to make sure it's roughly 80 BPM, you can have your metronome on as your resample recording. Of course, it doesn't capture that metronome. It just gives you a click track to work along to. If you turn it off, then it just begins recording instantly. I like it turned on because it gives you a count in before it starts recording, which means that when you're recording individual samples, you can lose some of the dead space that you need to trim out. So we'll do it here. Function, I'm going to leave my count in, which is set to 4. You can set your pre-count or something else and make sure metronome is on. And then when I hit audio capture, it's going to count me in. I can record this kick drum here. Just record it and then hit stop. And there we go. It comes into this recording screen where you instantly get your start and end point and it starts to loop. So you can hear it just loops the playback. If you want to stop that, you just press stop, press play, and start it again. But it just gives you a way of setting this up. If you press play and stop, you'll notice the playhead stops in the middle. So if you want to just be checking the start point, just stop and play. Going to give you a way to do that. You can also move through the sample using these as well, which is quite clever. No sample chopping. That's where we run into some limitations. No sample chopping in the sense that you can have a longer sample and then put your slice points in. So when you do it on this device, it's a little bit different to other older devices that don't have sample chopping. The workaround is usually to record one long sample, maybe move your start point to your first slice point, and then you copy onto another pad and then come back in, excuse me, and then you set your start point again, and you just keep repeating that process till you've got all the sample chops that you want. The difference with this one is that when you've got your start and end, which we'll dial in a second, if I assign it to a pad, I can't go back to that sample again. Like, there's no way to come back and tweak the start and end point. It's kind of like this little screen that you see here is a one-time deal, and when I assign it to a pad, there's no way to come back. Not that I've found. If you know a way, let me know in the comments, but I don't think it's possible. So the workaround for that is because the resampling is really easy, and I'll show you it here and how you can sort of navigate around that. Now, if you want to just copy a sample from one pad to another, you can do that with the copy function. So you're just moving a few samples around, you can swap them and move position, but you can't come back to this editing screen. So whatever we do here is kind of permanent. We want to move the start point for this sample. What you'll notice that's quite cool, you use your encoders. When you're far away, you've just got the gap. You want to close that gap up, so we're moving over to the right. And as we get closer to the waveform, you'll see a little zoom window appears, and that shows us roughly where we're dialing it. You can't zoom in any further. This is as basic as it gets, but using your ear and this, it's perfectly good. There's our kick drum. We've dialed in the start point. We don't even really need to do the end point, but just for the sake of it, it's exactly the same, only the zoom window is over on this other side as we get close to the end of the transient. And with these, if you move really fast, it will move in big chunks quite quickly. Or if you're just sort of being careful and dialing it in, it just moves quite slowly. It's quite intuitive once you've used it a little bit, but let's say that's where we wanted the end. It's a pretty tidy, neat kick drum. We're going to assign it to a pad, and then we get to choose where we want to assign it to. In this case, I'm going to put it down here, and I'm going to say yes. You get a little working time. There's more working time because autosave is turned on, so it's constantly writing to the SD card as a backup. Just means that you never really lose anything you're working on. You can turn that off, saves you a little bit of seeing the egg timer every once in a while, but it's not really a big problem for me, so I leave it there. But we've just made that first sample. Now, if we wanted to, let's say that was a long audio sample to do the sample chops, as I said, no way to access the edit menu to come back and change the start and end point. I could copy it, but that still won't give us access to it. The only way that I can do it is to recapture it. Now, for the sake of speedy recapture, what we'll do, or resampling, we'll turn this off, which is the metronome, and also the pre-count. And then in order to resample and get access to the start and end point for the same sample, it's kind of like copying it, but we're just resampling it. So we just do this, and that's it. Means we've got another copy of that where we could, if it was a long sample, move our start point to the next slice point over, and then just keep repeating that process till you've got your sample chops. Yep, it's long-winded. If you own a modern MPC, I know, I get it. It's not going to be the kind of thing that you might want to do. But if you want a sample chop and you want to do it on this device, it's really not that painful. It's something that you can just sit and you can do, and you can put your sample chops in. So anyway, that's how you would do it. If you don't want to save something, just clear and you can come out of there. I'm just going to quickly capture another couple of sounds, enough to give us a drum kit so that we've got something. This one, right? So we'll do exactly the same. Oops. Accidentally pressed that twice, so you'll see two snares. Doesn't matter. Just going to quickly run the start and end point so you can see. So you can move in quite big chunks. You just have to be gentle when you want to dial this thing in a little bit. So we want that as the beginning point. And I don't need the second one, so I'm quickly going to jump over and just keep a little eye on where we're at with certain things. Yeah, we've kind of dialed that in pretty tight, but it's going to be good enough. So I'm going to assign that over here to this next pad. There we go. And let's take a snare drum. Now, I'm going to put the metronome back on and the pre-count because I do think it's more accurate when you're sampling little short things like this. I get less dead space because I know to use the count in and then hit the sample. So again, one more time. See, way more accurate, and then I just need to usually just tweak the start point a little bit. Good enough, can be assigned to a new pad. Select this one this time and do it like that. So we've now got 3 drum sounds that we created. As you can see, it is assigning colors. They're pretty horrible. If you want to get rid of them, again, just select right at the very end and then move back one. You can dial your colors into whatever you want or turn them off. we're going to turn them off so that we don't have them, because we really don't need them. And they're pretty horrible, in my opinion. But there we go, back to just white lights. You get the idea. We can finger drum, do the stuff that we want to do. So that's your basic way of sampling. Now let's talk a little bit about resampling. If we wanted to resample, we've got 80 BPM here loaded up. If we want to resample with a metronome so that we're trying to get something in time, we can do that. Quickly though, with this is very loud, so let's use this to select, go back in here, and change our level. Just going to dial that down to a reasonable volume for the hi-hat. Still a bit loud for my taste. Better, that will do for now. If I want to just resample that, I can do it in real time and just use it without the metronome and then just loop it up and work out the BPM. That's easy. But because you can actually have the metronome on, it's pretty cool. If we got function, we got the metronome turned on. Let's just record a little pattern to roughly, let's dial it up. Let's go a little bit faster. Let's make this thing 85. Now, my timing was off there because for me, the metronome volume's a little bit too low. So I'm not worried about that. We didn't record that. What I'm going to do is go to metronome and just turn the metronome volume up a touch. Let's have it up a little bit more like that. And what we've done there, we've accidentally just recorded that in as a pattern. That's not what I meant to do. I'm just going to clear and say all instruments and say, yes, that's how you clear out a pattern, because I want to be using audio capture is what I'm trying to do. So we're going to do audio capture. Just like that. Left the extra kick drum can go to the end, just quickly scan across. I say the quicker you move, but you do have to be careful because otherwise it moves in pretty big chunks. We need to be back a little bit. So we want to be the beginning of this transient just about here somewhere. Try and slow down a little bit, but about there. Now, it might not be perfect. If you use the capture length, you can be more accurate with this, but I kind of like doing it this way so you get these kind of just off the grid kind of grooves. And what we'll do is we'll just make sure our start point is looking pretty good, which, yeah, looks pretty good about there. So we'll assign that to a pad, find somewhere where we don't have some samples. I think maybe this one doesn't have any samples on it, so we can load that up. And because it is a loop, something that we just recorded, we think it's roughly 85 BPM. It might not be dead on, but we can adjust that as we go through. What I could do is I could mute these other instruments for a second. I think they're muted now. Should know that because you won't hear them when you're playing. Yeah, only our drum loop. We just hold down the first step and we've put that pattern into the drum loop. Now, I only want one bar, so quickly change it to one bar. Yeah, my playing wasn't exactly spot on, but I've got very sweaty hands today. Excuses, excuses. But what we'll do is we'll adjust that. So what's the problem? It's a little bit hesitant, so it needs to be sped up. Let's try 86 BPM. Almost. Let's try 86.5. And actually, still not quite there. Double tap to stop all samples playing, by the way. And let's just dial it into 87. Still just ever so slightly hesitant. Let's put it to 87.5. You get the idea. That's how we can use resampling on this particular device to create drum loops, stuff just nice and easy off the grid. Of course, you've got your step sequencing and all of that, and we'll take just a quick look at that. I don't want to go too deep, but what we'll do, let's now do the opposite. So we're going to just unmute all of these. I think that should be unmuted. you'll see the red light's gone off, but I am going to mute this one this time, so we're not listening to our drum loop. We'll leave it at 87.5 because it doesn't matter. Now, when you want to input and do it on the step sequencer, just hold down a step, and we'll do a basic drum pattern like this. Hands are getting really, really sweaty, but there we go. I deliberately didn't put the hi-hats in so we can talk about a couple of things. When you're dealing with the step sequencer, I haven't found a way to nudge things off the grid yet. Hopefully, maybe I'll either discover something, and if not, it's not the end of the world because you can use non-quantized recording and do it sort of real-time recording. But it'd be great if you could just hold a pad, if anyone knows how to do this, and then maybe just nudge a sample. I'm not sure if it's possible, but that would be great. At the moment, it doesn't feel like it is. So when we put these things into this, the step sequencer, it can be quite rigid. But there are ways to loosen things up because what you do have on this device is swing. You've got plus and minus 50% swing where you can add some swing into your groove. So if you do want to use the step sequencer and input like this, that's going to give you that ability. The other problem when it comes to step sequencing in this way is that if you want velocity variation, again, there's no way of like holding a step and changing a velocity for a step. It doesn't seem to work that way. The way that you get velocity variation, so if we got our hi-hats here, which are currently in fixed velocity, that's what we're using, we have to input them to the steps, but you have to turn fixed velocity off. So function in 22, let's put this into high, which is like a velocity curve with a high sensitivity. It's okay, you have to thump it a little bit. Well, you get the idea. So when you've got these individual steps, that's how you put them in. So if the first one you want quite loud, turn function back off, I'd hit this quite hard. That's going to be my first one. And then you're doing that every time you hit it, whatever the volume is that you hit this pad with, that's what's input to the step. So you want it quietly, a little bit quieter, make that one harder. It's just hard getting the curve right. Easier with a separate MIDI controller because you've got better velocity, I think, on the sort of separate controllers. But I just want to show you a couple of ways that you can work around that. So that has been put into the steps. Now, when you're holding down, you will see whatever pad, your snares, your kicks, hi-hats, you will see whatever's lit up is where you've input a step. So we can see we've got all the hi-hats. And they do have some velocity variation. Now we can dial in some swing. We can do a bunch of other stuff. You can still resample at this point as well. If that's what you do, you want to resample from a pattern, then we could do that. So we could even do that. Let's say we wanted a bit of bit crushing on this. It's quite a lot of bit crushing, but let's change this to, I don't know, 12-bit. Let's say that's how we want to resample. Then it's the same deal. I can just resample from here. So I will press audio capture, let the counting come in, and then I'm going to try and hit play at the beginning. I think, again, with your capture stop where you can set the length, you can be slightly more accurate. I still haven't found a way to do that perfectly yet, but doing it this way works just fine, and I don't mind kind of dialing in an endpoint. But I just want to show you that to resample an entire pattern is just as simple. We hit this. Now, kind of duffed that up when I was pressing the play button. I was trying to get it in time. So we've got dead space, whereas we shouldn't have had so much dead space. But just so you get the idea, I can zoom in now and just get this dialed into the first kick drum. That's our resampled loop with the 12-bit effect in there, if that's what we wanted. And we know, because it's come from the pattern, that when you put it back into the step sequencer, generally that should line up and the tempo should be correct. But again, you've got the tempo where you can do little points if you need to tweak it here and there. I'm going to clear that because we're not going to use it. So we've looked at a lot of the basic functions. As I said, you've got an arpeggiator. Now, the arpeggiator, of course, for synths, something melodic. But what it's also useful for is note repeat, because this doesn't really have like a note repeat button. But if you select your hi-hat, something like this, what I'll do here, let's put it back into fixed velocity. So we'll do it like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out this pattern. Now, to clear out a pattern, you can just select the step and clear out. You can press play and clear by pressing clear in real time and then just hold the pad. So if you want to just try and dial in on one particular portion that you need to delete in real time, you just press clear while it's playing and then hold down the pad that you want to delete. And the other way is to go into clear while it's stopped and then choose the sample. Now, because we haven't named any of these, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to come out of that. So let's press clear again for a second. We know that this is PCM 062, so that's the hi-hats. If we'd named them, which you can name on the device, you can rename here, it would be easier to see. But if we clear, we know that that's the correct one. We want this one, so we want to just clear that. You can clear all instruments, everything from your pattern if you like, but we just want to clear one individual part. So this one, I just say yes, I say yes. Now when we look at the hi-hats, there's nothing input into any of those steps because we've just cleared out that particular part, but the kick drums and the snares are still there. That's so that we can turn the arpeggiator on and go to on. There's a bunch of different options for the arpeggiator. We're not getting into those just now, but I just want on, repeat, really basic. And then if we move over, I'm going to set it to just one. Actually, no, sorry. I'm going to set it to 132 is what I'm looking for. And I'm going to set this to not random, but to 1, like that. Just typical. That will change if you apply some swing. The pattern will be slightly different. But just so that you can see, you can record note rolls, repeats, ratchet, whatever you want to call it. That's how you do it here. So pretty crappy pattern, but you get the idea. Again, no 164, so 132 is kind of your maximum, but there are different division settings that you can mess around with in here. You can see them running through. I don't know if there's any triplets. Oh yeah, there are some triplets. So yeah, there's plenty of scope for playing around and getting your little note rolls. I don't really do that kind of thing very much, but just if you want to know how to do it on this device. So I think we've covered most of the basics of how this thing works. We've looked at just the basic workflow of it. So your pads around the edge, assign loops, one-shots, your instruments, the built-in synth engine, we've taken a look at that. How you can easily resample. Everything is just so easy on this thing. That's why I think it's a little bit of a hidden gem. I don't know many devices where just coming into audio capture, whether it's from an external source or resampling from a device, is as quick as just one button press as it is here to just get that done. Again, if you take a sample like that and I wanted a little bit of reverb on that sample, it's just a case of that. As long as this is off, I can really do it quickly where we just make sure the tail's there. But there's that sample. I just love the ease of use of this thing. As I said, the circle shape, the removable donut, the weird LED lights. There's a lot of things that you might not like about it. Might be too strange for you, might be a little bit kooky. But hopefully this video has demonstrated, just in basic form, some of the possibilities that you have here, because a lot of these parameters can be tweaked. Now, one other thing I meant to show you was the automation of those parameters, because I think that is important. So actually, let's do that before I sign off. Let's just clear. We don't need that sample. Let's take our hi-hats. Turn this effect off. Let's put a different pattern in here. So we're going to go to clear. We know this is the hi-hat sound, so we can say yes. And quickly put another basic pattern in, all at fixed velocity. So how do you automate? Well, you do that using the motion sequence. This is really powerful because it applies to a lot of the parameters in here. We're going to do something basic. So the first one would be, I don't know, let's say we want to go to the volume. So we need to select this one and we've got our level. Now we're already quite low, but I'm going to try and just change the volume level while this is on. And all you need to do is turn this on and press play. You don't have to press record, but watch what happens. I'll let it play and I'll move the volume level as this is happening. We've just recorded that automation. And a lot of this, the resonance, your LFOs, filters, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. I mean, we can try a different one and they can be stacked. It's not just to one particular thing. So that one, actually, I thought it was volume we were looking at, but we were messing with the filter there. But there are definitely other things that you can change. Let's go to volume. Let's see, level. Do the same thing again. you can see that parameter being recorded in real time. The other thing that you can do, aside from just exploring that, because a lot of those parameters in here throughout all of this can be tweaked and recorded, you also can do that with your master effects. But I want to show you how that works. So let's say you wanted bit crushing as part of the effect, something that you wanted to happen during the pattern. What we'll do, we'll turn motion sequence on, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And I'm just going to turn this on wherever I want that bit crushing to come in. You get the idea. It's recorded that as an automation. Now, the difference with this one is that it doesn't stack. So the parameters in here, like you see, we could have volume levels, we could have filters, we could have a bunch of things being recorded at the same time. This one with the master effect is kind of like a one-shot deal. So we can use the bit crushing. We can move over and say we go to release, which is like a bit of a tape stop thing. I'll just use it however it sounds, but it's probably just going to kind of stop the playback. Let's just see. Motion sequence. You can hear that. It still remembers that the bit crushing is there, and you can bounce between those back and forth, but it won't play two of those automated effects at the same time. If you wanted to do that, then you would resample. You would have this one set up, resample that as a loop, put it back in, play it again, and then record another automation over the top of that. That's how you could stack those effects if you wanted to. But just watch as we play. I'll move back to like the bit crushing. You'll see it still remembers the automations there. It just won't play the effects at the same time. So all in all, pretty clever when you think about it. And if we take a look here, in terms of clearing it, it's just, again, it's really simple with this device. If you want to clear any of those automations that we just created, while the pattern is stopped, we hit clear, and we're clearing the information for the pattern. But if you move through, look, motion filter level, that's 1. So I don't want that anymore. We just say yes, and we get rid of it. And then when we're back, go to clear, and motion level, that was the other one that we played around with. So again, we don't want it. Anything that you've changed will just be listed, and it's clearly listed. It's not hard to tell what you're messing with. If we go back to the pattern anyway, you get the idea. I don't even remember what pattern. I've accidentally changed my pattern. That's one thing you need to be mindful of. I think it was this one here. If we clear and we go through, there should be some more, I think. Motion, release, and again, don't want that effect. You can turn it off. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I hope this was an interesting enough episode. I bought this thing because it was just so cheap, I couldn't resist it. 100 quid. It's a completely standalone sampler. The OS and the firmware that's currently on it, it's never going to get updated again. It's 7 years old, but it is stable. It works. There isn't really too many bugs that I've found. I think on occasion there was something about triggering a sample, but I just had to do it twice. But other than that, really, it's a stable little standalone unit with the LEDs taken out of the equation. I think it's kind of cool. And I think it's got a lot of power behind it. Anyway, I'm sweating to death, so I'm going to sign off, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.